So just to catch everybody up, Israel, of course, took out a Hezbollah leader in Beirut, Lebanon. And also, it appears like they took out a Hamas leader in Tehran. And this was the head, not of Hamas's military wing, actually their political wing. And there were reports that he was one of the guys engaged in ceasefire negotiations. So to kill a guy who's in the middle of doing the ceasefire negotiations would certainly indicate that Israel's not interested in a ceasefire deal. So Iran, to your point, is threatening massive retaliation. As of the recording of this right now, that hasn't happened yet, but they're threatening massive retaliation. So if you were in the White House, how would you handle such an extreme situation? And do you view it as Israel effectively trying to drag the U.S. into a much wider Middle East war?
Absolutely, because Israel, in the course of 24 hours, went on the offensive against Iran, because that assassination took place, with the inauguration of a new president in Iran who wanted to improve relations with the West. And it's extremely humiliating to Iran to be assassinating a major international leader right there at the ceremonies for the inauguration of this new president. So Israel very effectively burned bridges. Not that there were bridges to start with Iran, but prevented the rebuilding of any kind of bridges with Iran, basically prevented any kind of moves towards ceasefire by knocking off the lead negotiator for Hamas. So they took on Hamas, Iran, Hezbollah, and only a few days earlier, had done a massive bombing in Yemen and against the Houthis. So they've effectively mobilized unbelievable firepower against them, really sort of daring the U.S. or cornering the U.S. into having to come to their aid. So, if I were in the White House at this point, I would be reaching out to all parties and making clear that the weapons flow to Israel stops. Because that will solve the whole thing. This is effectively about Israel's very aggressive policy and its expanding genocidal war. So, it essentially takes the driver out of this entire conflict to clarify that the genocide against the Palestinians is over. And the president can do that with a simple phone call to Israel, like Ronald Reagan did to Menachem Begin when Israel had chased the PLO, which was the terrorist du jour. There will always be resistance in a vicious occupation, and at the time it was the PLO. And Israel had chased the PLO into southern Lebanon and was committing massacres against thousands of people. And that was horrifying, even to Ronald Reagan, who basically picked up the phone and said, "It's over." And it was. Immediately, it was over. Dwight Eisenhower did the same thing decades earlier. So this is what the U.S. can do, because we're supplying 80% of the weapons, the funding, the diplomatic cover, the intelligence and strategy, and so on. So we can effectively end that genocide. And Kamala's remarks after meeting with Netanyahu that she was feeling the pain, it's like just total crocodile tears here, because if you're truly in sympathy with Palestinian people, you can do something about it. And she hadn't done squat. And now, push has really come to shove, and we haven't heard a thing. But this is what the president of the United States can do with a phone call, essentially, can decompress this entire situation and then sit down and actually begin to conduct a real process of negotiations that forces all parties, but in particular the Israelis, because they are the odd man out here. They're the one party to this conflict, centering around Gaza, that has refused to accept the ceasefire, the most recent ceasefire agreement. It's been Israel who's been dragging their feet. Hamas has already agreed to it. So we can push that.
And of course, just assassasinated the main negotiator who was pushing for a ceasefire deal and was more of a moderating influence vis-a-vis, as compared to Yahya Sinwar and the military leadership reportedly, Hania was an asset in terms of trying to get to a ceasefire deal. So, but obviously, Bibi has never wanted a ceasefire deal, and he still doesn't want a ceasefire deal. Dr. Stein, what in your view would come after the ceasefire? If you are president, you make that call, the genocide ends. You're now dealing with a state that isn't even pretending to be interested in a two-state solution. The Knesset just overwhelmingly voted against a two-state solution. The Oslo process clearly dead. So what then? What comes next to try to secure some sort of a lasting and just peace?
Yeah, I think for the first time we need to sit down and negotiate with the U.S. Supporting a true peace process that complies with international law. So that means, at the very least, we have to comply with the 1967 borders. Israel needs to end its occupation, not just of Gaza, but effectively its occupation, throughout all of Palestine. It needs to remove its troops, and the apartheid government of Israel needs to come to an end. This is not going to be simple. This is not going to be easy. And, Israel has the nuclear bomb as well, which is why what's going on right now is so unbelievably dangerous, because Netanyahu, there's no doubt he would use a nuclear weapon if he needs to. And of course, Russia, who is allied with Iran, they also have a nuclear weapon. I mean, they have loads of nuclear weapons. So, this could be a rush into World War III going on here. So we need to sit down as a true proponent of international law and insist that Israel comply. The ICJ, the International Court of Justice, just issued a second ruling saying that all of these things need to be complied with, and that the ethnic cleansing, the occupation, the apartheid need to end. And in fact, the right of return needs to be respected. Reparations need to be paid to Palestine. So, international law is pretty clear about what it calls for. The U.S. has never supported international law here as a means of actually solving this, which is why the U.S. is always trying to create some other independent parallel process where we can make our own rules, not only here, but really everywhere. NATO is our alternative vehicle for establishing policy and gaining some kind of support with it. But the world is really united right now. Israel's economy is also going down, and its military is having a very hard time right now dealing with Gaza alone. So there's no way that Israel can take on this battle without that is the battle that it has engaged, that it is begging for. It cannot do that without full-bore support from the U.S., which makes it really imperative that the U.S. Stand up now before it's too late, before we're going to be dragged into it, which we should not be. This is an absolute deadly conflict, which has every capacity to spiral into not only a major regional, but potentially a World War III type conflict that could readily go nuclear. And Israel, Netanyahu, and the fascist government that they have now, it's not hard to envision they're using a nuclear weapon. But let me also just say what can be done here, which is to continue the economic boycott, and which is informal at this point, but it should be formalized. And the U.S. needs to lay this out to Israel. Here's what you need to do. If you're not going to do that, the flow of weapons is over, our economic support is over, and in fact, we will be leading and supporting a global economic boycott. And you can't, they can't use a nuclear weapon against that. And that's already had a huge impact on Israel. People are leaving by the droves from Israel. Their tourist industry obviously has taken a total nosedive. They've had to close down one of their major ports because of the, essentially the boycotts and the lack of commerce now with Israel. So Israel is in a very difficult crisis right now, and there is no way out of this other than either World War III and the use of nuclear weapons, or the U.S. standing up on the side of international law and human rights.
All right, guys, we had Dr. Jill Stein, the Green Party presidential candidate, on the show this week. Definitely check it out. It was a phenomenal interview. We got in current events, and we got to all of her policies. So check it out below. Substack, you can sign up for free, or you can sign up for $5 a month and get the video version and get it a day earlier.